Yes, that's exactly the text I got today.
Hey, this should be really fun. First of all, your first clue should be, have I ever said I'm the MC broker? You know, I may be the hammer, but I'm not an MC hammer. So just saying. And you have to be old to know who that is. But I want to just give you a heads up. How many have not gotten one of these kinds of messages? Really? Okay. What'll happen is people will go through, they'll go jump online. I think the message I sent out today is please don't feed the Russian oligarchs, the Nigerian princes, or the Asian gangs. But what I'm telling you is there are people out there that they'll hit a real estate brokerage that has a decent roster, and they'll say, oh, it's Dean, it's Shoni, it's Novalee, it's someone in leadership, it's Johnny. And they'll say, hey, I'm in a meeting, but I need your help. And you're because you're agents and you're make it happen people, you'll say, what can I do? And you'll say, first of all, I should be in your phone. If I'm not in your phone, that's on you. But it's coming from a weird number. This is a 323 area code number. This happened to be Chris's message that I took. But bottom line is, would you guys just watch out? Please know that we're not going to ask you, oh, it's an emergency, I need you to do something right now and spend money. Those should be some clues. Anyway, it's a trap. Okay, so please don't. All right. Like I said, maybe it's a Nigerian princess. Don't know. Not pointing at anybody here. There you go. All right. So
asking specifically for Nordstrom's or Lululemon, that was for me. Bring those to me.
Okay, no. So really quick, just want to talk about the came back from NAR a couple of weeks ago, the week before Thanksgiving, but I wanted to talk with you about what's going on. First of all, regarding the lawsuits, I'm going to talk to you about NAR just for a second. As I sat there and listened, everybody in NAR was, oh, we're going to appeal this judgment for the 1.8, which is then treble damages is $5.4+ billion. In order to appeal it, you actually have to bond for it. Knowing that since the judgment was already made, there are now, I believe, 19 copycat lawsuits. Heard about one in Atlanta yesterday. So if you were the company that was going to be putting the bond money up, how confident would you be to do that for NAR or for NAR, KW, and Home Services of America? Those are the three defendants in the first case. Probably not super helpful. So they're looking at some other angles, saying, well, there were some processes that hurt the jury, that prejudiced the jury. Therefore, we should be able to make this happen. We won't know anything honestly until February or March. That's when this will all kind of be heard. So there are some things that we're asking you to do now so that we're not creating, if you will, a paper trail for people that are searching for discovery items. Yesterday, I saw one of our agents had put on her buyer broker agreement 0. Stop it. Okay, so the first thing, do not put 0 for commissions on your buyer broker agreement unless you're truly working for 0. How many here are, honestly, does anybody here work for 0 on a deal? Are there deals you might? No, that's been experiential, not necessarily on purpose, right? Okay, probably. But there are some times when you say, hey, I'm going to work for someone and I am going to work for 0. That's a possibility, or the minimum. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, exactly. Even if you're choosing to give it back, put a number in there. Now, I typically on my buyers, I ask for 3% because it's worth it. Now, I also put in an addendum. If I can't negotiate 2.5%, the buyer will make up the difference to that 2.5%. Or I'll say the buyer doesn't have to do anything. I'll put that in, but that's make sure that we're specific. If you have questions, let's talk one-on-one. I'm happy to do that, but do not put 0. Because that's part of the big lie, if you will. We don't work for 0. We're working for a BAC, which is a cooperation between brokerages. Yeah, Rob.
These people thinking, the agents thinking that the buyer's not really paying me anything, so I'm going to put 0 down. Is that what they're?
I don't know the motivations for agents. Some agents will say, I'll be frank, I think I'll say old school as I look in the mirror. some of the old school agents would actually put down, I work for zero because the listing brokerage already is going to be paying me a commission. I'm going to be paid by the listing brokerage. You notice I didn't say seller. Do you notice I'm being very specific, the listing brokerage, and that's what the MLS is about. It's the cooperation and the compensation pieces. So there are specific rules of engagement. The marketplace is the multiple listing service. Yeah.
Agents that put 2.5%. I was shocked to see that just because I've always charged 3% to buyers. But what if
There's antitrust says you can charge whatever you choose to charge. If you think you're only worth 2.5, put 2.5.
what if the agent that decides they want to charge 2.5 and the listing brokerage is offering 3? Are they entitled to the full 3 since they put 2.5 on the 2?
Listing brokerages don't look at buyer broker agreements unless you're a foolish agent and you forward your buyer broker agreement over. So I've had people do that. Yeah. And so that happens. So if someone is, and they're saying, great, I'll pay you what your your brokerage agreement says. Had an experience about 20 years ago. There's a particular broker who has a reputation of being a horse's patoot at times, and that's a technical term if you needed to know. And he had asked specifically, he said, I want to see your buyer broker agreement. And this was a ask of another agent. He sent it over, and they said, I think it was like they put an as per the MLS on there. And so they said, we'll accept whatever the MLS is offering. And because of that, the MLS, it was a 3% offering for BAC. Therefore, he sent over that. But the whole intent was, if someone put 0, he goes, I'm going to honor your buyer broker agreement. That was his intent. So it's up to you. I would recommend you put a number in there. Don't put a 0. Yeah. So great. Colby's going to put 5% on there on it. Nope, it's not a B. Oh, on your BAC, you're going to offer BAC? All right, but I'm just letting you know that hopefully in sales meetings across the state, because this was the direction we got from Chris Kyler at UAR. First, do not put 0 on your buyer broker agreements. Can I be more clear? Please don't. Yeah, Amber. Yeah, I don't recommend giving a contract between you and your client to the other side. And there's no legal requirement for it. Yes, Peter. Yeah. Part 5 of the rep sheet does confirm agency already, saying that there is agency. So darn it, don't you dare fill out a rep sheet without having a buyer broker in place. No, you just tell them to pound sand. Their contract actually does disclose agency, on that. So whether it's builder X or builder Y, and again, I'm not gonna go down the antitrust rabbit hole and say we're gonna pick on, builder X or whatever. Well, yeah. Let's talk about exploitation later, Colby. Let's do it one-on-one, not in a public forum. All right. So that's the first one. Second piece on there. For listings, please disclose. Now, your listing agreement should be very clear. We already do this. Like I said, we're in a great position in the state of Utah. We've been doing this. This particular listing agreement has been in place for years, right? We charge X. So if I charge 7% for my listing, and I'm going to offer 3% of that to a buyer agent, I'm going to put that as a carrot out there in the marketplace. I can do that. And I've disclosed to the seller, and it's very clear. In fact, we make the seller initial that piece of it. So that's part of it. This is, Amber, tell me if I'm wrong. Is this part of the not professionalism real estate, but the mandatory course? Don't we even go through that? I think they go through that. I mean, different parts of the CE course itself, I think, goes through, these are your documents and this is how you would fill that out. And you'll have all the case studies of why you would want to do that. And your CE instructors are great about using examples of why you don't want to put, we're not paying the buyer's side anything. Because you will find, do a quick search. You can't search anymore on the MLS for this, but you'll find certain listings that will offer $1 for a BAC. Now, you may not be happy with it, but that's why you want to have a buyer broker in place so that you're compensated, because your buyer is going to be obligated to bring that to you. But we also have an addendum that, quite frankly, there's probably 30 different states have asked Chris Carter for permission to use that document. That's the payment addendum. So that if let's say the BAC is $500 and you want a little bit more than $500 for that $700,000 house, you can say, seller, you're going to pay my brokerage today. That could change over time. It just depends on what the fallout is from the lawsuits and all the settlements that come through. So please, so on the list side, make sure that you are very, very clear on what you're charging and then what you're going to be offering on the marketplace to a cooperative broker. Okay, the next one, listing agents. This just a reminder, you may not represent both sides of a transaction. Okay, and I'll give you it's a separate example. It's different from this. Had a lender, an agent who's both a licensed lender as well as a licensed real estate agent, asked, can I do both on the same transaction? The answer is, oh, heck no. That it's been that way for almost 15 years, that you cannot do both on the same transaction. Now, this particular lender has a spouse who's a licensed agent. And I said, great, have your spouse represent on the representation for the house, for the real estate purchase. You can handle the loan piece of that. That's not illegal. There's just some disclosure that goes on. Okay, but as a reminder, you may not represent a buyer and a seller in the same transaction. Okay, you can't be a fiduciary to both. I won't let you do that. It's legal in the state of Utah today. I promise you, with the DOJ that's looking at all of these things, that's going to change. So just be aware of that. If ever in doubt, please disclose. And then the last one, and I promise you, we're going to figure it out as we get more direction. KW is going to be in place. There are so many people that are saying, oh, you should get out of KW because they lost in a lawsuit. Are you kidding? Who would be more in position to protect you and make sure that you're doing all the right things than KW right now? So anyway, know that we got your back. We'll take care of you. Anyway, and here's Shoni.
So today the conversation is around health. And I am not a health guru, but I am a good student of maximizing my health. So I'm not a personal trainer or anything like that, but I've done a lot when it comes to finding out how to maintain and optimize my health. And I want to share some of those ideas and thoughts with you guys today. Hunter is passing around a sheet. Please flip that over so you're not distracted by it. Take notes on the backside if you have a pen with you. And if not, we have some in the back, so we'll also pass those out. But just flip it over so you're not looking at the actual sheet until we get to that exercise. So new year, new you. How many people have set health goals in previous years? Okay, good chunk. How many of you already have health goals identified for 2024? Cool, good amount. So I'm curious, why health? Why is this such an important topic for us to have a conversation around? Why is this important to you? You can't win if you're dead. True. It's a good one. Cameron?
Life's tough to enjoy if you're in poor health.
Yeah. Yeah, life is very tough to enjoy if you don't have your health. It's great. Why else? Courtney? So the strength of your business is actually impacted by your health. Yeah. Spencer, did you have something? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think health and wellness matter because it is actually tied to all other areas of life. Like if you really think about your business, you think about your family relationships, your energy levels, all of those things are actually directly impacted by your quality of health. And I think the most important piece to really speak to is just your overall happiness. And our happiness is directly correlated to our health. And for perspective, when I say the term health, It's actually not just simply physical health. So we're going to talk about this today. So on the agenda, we're going to talk about what I would call the four dimensions of health. And so one of the goals could be that you want to achieve 4-dimensional health, okay, 4D health. You want to focus on developing healthy habits in these different core areas. And so as we're talking about this today, I'm going to throw out some different habits that you can think about, look at, but I would encourage you just to come out with at least 4 habits that you're going to stay consistent with in 2024, basically 1 per category of health. And some of these things you might already do. So you might say, I want to add another one to improve that specific area. And then we're going to go over this process of determining what I'll call the life happiness index. Okay, so we'll go through a specific activity for this. So I want to define wellness first. So this is from the World Health Organization. They say a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So again, oftentimes when we think of health, we think of just physical, right? Where we stand from a physical perspective. As long as we're not sick, we kind of have this idea that we may be healthy. And this poses a different perspective where it's not just your physical health, it's your mental health, it's your social well-being. And there's a few different components that we're going to talk about around that. Wellness is an active process of becoming aware of and making choices toward a healthy and fulfilling life. So wellness is more than being free from illness. It is a dynamic process of change and growth. Okay. So that's how we're going to define wellness for today's conversation. So the 4 dimensions of health. Okay. Think about these different areas of your life: physical, mental. I know this one's a little hard to see. This is spiritual, and then social down at the bottom. Okay. These are the 4 areas that you'll want to find and kind of be a little bit aware of. How do I stand in that specific area as we're talking about these? And we're going to go into depth on each area. Now, the 4 dimensions of health. This is interesting. I think if you have kind of a perspective of each of these dimensions are connected. Okay, they're all interconnected. And just as if we were driving down the road and we have a flat tire. Now, flat tires are on my mind. I'm going to share this in a moment. My wife ran over a nail yesterday, and so we had a flat tire on her car. And even though you have 3 tires that are well inflated, how well does that car drive when 1 tire is flat? Not great, right? Even though the car itself is totally fine. And I want you to think about in your life, typically there's one of these areas that's kind of neglected. And what happens is you start seeing some of the side effects in other areas of life. And then actually, if you kind of inspect these different categories, you'll realize that some of the problems you're seeing or the symptoms in other areas are actually reflective of neglect in one of these core areas of life. Okay. And so as we're having this conversation, just think about that. Where do you feel like you may have not put intentionality or energy into, or that you don't have specific routines or habits built into your day or week that support these 4 core areas? I think all 4 of those is what impacts your overall health status, okay, or your fulfillment factor in life. So let's dive into this. So the 4 dimensions of health, each dimension is equally important. So it's not that one is more important than the other. They're all connected. And this is, again, in pursuit of optimal health. Will you actually refresh these slides? Just to make sure I have everything up to date. Thank you. And one can reach an optimal level of health and wellness by understanding how to maintain and optimize each of the dimensions of health. Here's an interesting one. If you don't take time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. Okay. Cameron kind of pointed that out with his perspective, is that without health, really nothing else matters. There's people who have all the money in the world and they don't have their health, and they would trade all the money in the world for their health if they could. Okay. I want you to think about how many of you have experienced either family going through illnesses or yourself has gone through illness where business doesn't matter, right? Your hobbies really don't matter. It all comes back to, I just wish that I had my one thing, my health, right? So I want you to think about, again, the 4 dimensions of health kind of as like an ecosystem. It's not like, is water more important than the trees that we have on this earth? No, right? They all work together, and similar, these 4 different aspects are all important pieces of just happiness overall. So let's dive into the first one, physical health. A healthy person has 1,000 wishes. A sick person has only one. So for each of these, the format is we're going to go through what I'll call key components of these specific areas. And then we'll talk about the habits or potential habits that you can install to your routine. So Jim Rohn, he says, take care of your body. It's the only place you have to live, right? And so these are 4 areas that help you with what I'll call the preventative healthcare routine, okay? And nutrition. You've got to eat right for your type. This is actually a book title by Peter Adamo. And his book is, has anybody read that book? Really interesting. So it actually talks about your diet should actually be dependent on your blood type. And I actually, about 5 years ago, went to this doctor in Colorado. We went as a part of this mastermind group. We all flew out to Colorado to visit this doctor, and he basically lived in a cave. I'll just kind of explain it like this. It was in Crestone. Has anybody been to Crestone, Colorado? Okay. So it is just like a complete desert, and his house is up on the hill. And he's a holistic healthcare doctor. And he took our blood and put it under a microscope and showed us, just individual sessions, showed us what was in our blood, and kind of gave us some guidance on how we should change our diet to impact optimal health. And he gave a bunch of just very interesting perspective, but what he did was printed out a whole sheet of foods that were important based on your specific blood type. And so that book actually dives in, and it has a ton of 5-star Amazon reviews. You should go check it out, but even just go look at the summary of the book. But if you really want to optimize your health diet wise, I would actually recommend checking that book out for some perspective. Exercise, regular physical activity to maintain fitness and optimal functionality. Funny thing is, like, I was consistent with running and with, strength training. But one of the things I realized about 1.5 years ago is how important flexibility is for my health. And so stretching, doing yoga, things like that has had a massive impact. David Goggins, has anybody read his book, Can't Hurt Me? Okay, so he's a former Navy SEAL. Really, just if you do read that book, very rough language, but he is an interesting individual. And he talks about how he was going through so many different health issues as a Navy SEAL. And the one thing that changed his life was stretching. Really interesting. And he does ultra marathons, these 100-mile races. Did the Death Valley race. It's like 120 or 130 miles through Death Valley in crazy heat. And he actually puts a lot of his success physically on exercise, on just doing stretches. Rest, adequate sleep, rest for recovery and rejuvenation. So who has really focused on improving their health in the past? Okay, good. A few of you. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you have done to improve your sleep, or things that you just noticed about sleep patterns for yourself? Yeah.
So for me, I like to exercise in the morning.
Mhm.
As opposed to evening, where I feel like I work out in the morning, and I do that because if I was to do it in the evening, then my body just stays up, and I'm an early to bed, early to rise type person. So yeah, that really affects my sleep patterns.
Does anybody feel like they have the opposite sleep pattern? They like stay up, they're night owls, and they don't thrive in the morning. It's interesting just to start noticing your pattern, right? We do all have kind of different internal clocks. And so that's important to be aware of. Anybody else have anything? Jake?
I've been trying out a sleeping app. It's called Sleep Cycle. You just put it on your what do you call it? Nightstand.
Yeah.
And it listens to you all night. So I know exactly how many minutes of snoring I had last night. 58 minutes. But it shows you trends, right? And then also different things that affect it. So before you go to bed, you're like, I worked out late, or I had late caffeine, or I don't know, worked out or whatever. And then over time, you'll know which of those things are contributing to have more regular sleep. So there's also a stat for quality of sleep and also regularity, which is going to bed and waking up around the same time. And so there's a lot of different stats and data that has helped with being able to be like, oh, yeah, I am improving in this area or that area. It's been really fascinating to see.
Was it Sleep Analyzer? Sleep Cycle. Sleep Cycle.
Does it record you?
It records your sleep talking. It's going to say that sounds like Tim.
It's Timmy.
Well, any others? Any ways you positively impacted your sleep?
I've kind of always suffered with like insomnia. My mind like races at night, and so I can't like shut it off. I'll normally like watch something to just keep my mind busy versus thinking about real life. One thing that I do often is I'll put a YouTube video. It's like called I Am Affirmations, and I just play that in the back, and I'm just hearing affirmations all night, like in my head, and so it's like I wake up the next morning thinking I am this, I am that, I am that, and it's just a different way versus watching like, I don't know, any cartoon or whatever.
Yeah,
So I like that.
that's awesome. That's my wife. She listens to these kind of meditations with her earpods in, and that helps her fall to sleep. Unfortunately, she also listens to this podcast. It's like the murderer podcast. You ladies know what I'm talking about, right? And so she's like, there's been a couple nights where I've woken up and I've gone through the whole meditations, and it's like telling me a scary, story. And I'm like, yeah, you should not listen to that because you're going to end up killing me. So if I do die, you all know, look at Julie first. One that has had a massive impact for me over the last it's about 3 years now, is the Oura Ring. And Johnny actually recommended this to me early on. And that has been a game changer because it tracks everything tied to your sleep and a few different factors. And it has a couple different screens that you can look at. This is just one screen of data that it tracks. So things like your body temperature, your recovery index, which is interesting. So sometimes I might have a full 8 or 9 hours of sleep and not feel rejuvenated, right? And I actually started to realize a pattern of if I eat a heavy meal before going to bed, like, a steak dinner, that's actually going to cause me to not get the best night of sleep because your body actually takes so much energy to digest, right? That's actually one of the most labor intensive things your body does. And so if you eat heavy meals before sleeping, even though you feel like you got a lot of sleep, you're not actually maximizing your sleep. Another one I realized was caffeine. I have to cut caffeine off at like 1 p.m. And so nothing, no sodas or stuff like that for dinner because that would impact my quality of sleep. So now I can get actually less sleep and feel like I got more. So there's a bunch of different statistics that it tracks for you, your sleep timeline, everything. And that data stays there. So I have 3 years of data and it tells me trends. And so it shows me different things. My health, as far as activity, it tracks all my steps and my exercise routines, and it shows how that also impacts my sleep quality. So rest is so important. And I'll tell you that probably is one of the biggest game changers for me in just life and overall health is the really focusing on quality of sleep. Healthy lifestyle choices, you are what you eat. So just remember that. Okay. All right. So for this one, Dean so graciously let me take a photo of him after his workout. And physical health, one of the most important pieces is your daily disciplines, is what we'll call them. So here are a few different things that you can focus on. Now, clarity of vision, purpose, identity, the North Star process is what I'll call it. These are just 8 different options that you can integrate into your routine. But it's interesting. Your physical health actually does depend on your vision for your life. Like how long you want to live. Does anybody know what Gary Keller's goal is to live to? To 100, right? So that vision influences what he eats that day. It influences how much sleep he gets. It influences how he treats his body, right? So that's actually why that one is the first part, is you have to define, well, do you want to be alive at 85 years old and seeing your grandkids and great grandkids? Is that something that's important to you, right? So getting clarity around that's important. Train 6 times per week, 30 minutes or less, even if it's just walking, right? So making sure that you have some consistency around your exercise routine. Sleep consistency, we've talked about. Adequate hydration, so making sure that you're drinking enough water. Fuel up routine. So this is, there's a few people who've been to a Tony Robbins event, and he talks about peak state, right? So how do you physically get into your prime state? And so even with that, you can do it before like going on a listing appointment. Like you might have done your exercise routine at 9 a.m., but if you're going on a listing appointment at 3 o'clock or 5 p.m. in the afternoon, that probably wore off. So do you have a 3-minute or 5-minute routine to get you refueled, right? Supplements, especially during the winter time here in Utah, we don't get a ton of sun, right? So thinking like vitamin D and things like that can help with your emotional state, but also your physical state. Daily debrief and preparation, and then results tracking system. I'm not going to go for timing into all of these in depth, but just think about, well, what are my current routines or habits? And which one would I like to add to my process in the future? Spiritual health. So this is something that Gary Keller also talks about, is we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And this is one of those areas of life that has such an impact on your overall health. And so the key components, mindfulness, so regular practice that promote presence and awareness, such as meditation or prayer. Reflection, so engaging in introspection to understand personal values and beliefs. We've talked about this in the form of thinking time, right? So we do a lot of doing time, especially as entrepreneurs. We're consistently busy, but taking time to just slow down, reset. Sometimes that is a good connection to nature or just to yourself, right? Taking yourself on a date. We've talked about that as well. So connection, fostering relationships in the sense of belonging, either through community, nature, or a higher power. Gratitude is one of those big pieces of the spirituality side. So regularly expressing thankfulness and appreciation for life. And then purpose, finding your purpose and your meaning behind why you do what you do and why you're here. Pursuing meaningful goals and activities that align with one's values. Okay. So that's the key components of spiritual health. Here's some daily practices of spiritual wellness. Faith, believing in something greater that impacts how you live. And so, for some people, this is your religious beliefs. For some people, this is what I'll call your spiritual beliefs, right? Whatever your beliefs, wherever you stand on that frame, just having a belief that there's something bigger than you out there. And spiritual practices. So meditation, prayer, your rituals, disconnect to connect. So spending time in nature and reflection without digital influence. So this, sometimes we have to purposely disconnect because we have so much influence from the outside world today. It's easier than ever for us to consistently consume. And so how do we pause that and make sure that we are aligning internally and kind of shutting out some of the digital influences? Your beliefs. So continuously exploring and nurturing personal values and beliefs. We just mentioned that one. And that's where oftentimes if you get clear about what are your values, what things do you believe in and value in life? And that actually impacts your business. That impacts how you show up for family, for friends. It impacts a lot of how you do what you do. And then gratitude, be grateful for what you have while pursuing what you can become. So this is Ed Mylett talks about blissful dissatisfaction, right? It says, how many of you have eaten a really great steak in the past? Okay. Now, how many of you, as soon as you take a bite of that steak, and let's say it's the best steak you've ever had, say, that's the best bite I've ever had, I'm done. None of you? Okay. What do you want to do? keep eating, right? So it's totally fine to say, I'm so glad and grateful for what I have in my experiences of the past, but I can still be focused on pursuing more. Okay. That actually is a part of the spiritual game. And so it's okay to be happy and grateful for the things you've had while you're pursuing more. Okay. So that's his idea of blissful dissatisfaction. Mental and emotional health. Hunter, will you hide that floating bar? Thank you. So mental and emotional health. This is the third area. So you alone decide what thoughts and beliefs you let into your life. Be mindful, for they will shape whether you feel rich or poor, cursed or blessed. Okay. So your mental and emotional state, they're really two separate pieces, but they're so well connected, right? They're basically cousins. So these things are two different areas that you really want to focus on. And you want to look at, if you will click on the slides. Thank you. Jim Rohn talks about this. He says, every day stand guard at the door of your mind. Okay, every day stand guard at the door of your mind. And does anybody recognize this individual? What's his name? Robin Williams. So Robin Williams had, I believe, a massive impact on like the world, right? By how he showed up. This actually photo is a photo of him with a homeless man. And as I was doing some research on this, I couldn't confirm like the exact stories, but if you go look online, you'll see a ton of different people talking about this. How with every movie that he would create, he would actually force the producers to bring homeless people off the streets and put them to work, essentially. Give them different tasks behind the scenes to make a positive impact on those people he really cared for. And what kind of movies did he mostly play roles in? Comedy. What was he really known for? Comedy, right? Trying to make other people happy. And ultimately ended up taking his own life, right? And so this is one of those realities that our mental health, our emotional health matters so much, especially even for the people that we serve, because we can be outwardly putting on a mask, right? And look one way to people, but internally be feeling something completely different. And so that's why this dynamic of mental health is such an important piece, and emotional health is knowing that, where you're at mentally and getting help if you need it, right? Asking people for support is such an important piece, especially in sales, right? We know it can be a beatdown sometimes. And so making sure that you have a practice, a routine around safeguarding and really enhancing your mind and your emotional state. So emotional health, on the flip side, what you see and what you hear depends a great deal on where you are standing. It also depends on what sort of person you are. So this is a quote from C.S. Lewis, and I want to highlight the way that I received this quote, this where you are standing. Think of it in terms of where are you standing emotionally in life, right? Think of it in terms of we all, and we've done this before as a leadership team, if I'm standing here, do I have, even though we're in the same room, do I have a completely different view than each of you looking this way? Yeah. But we're experiencing something very similar, but different perspectives, right? And similarly, how many of you have had something happen and it immediately just triggered you? Either you got in a car accident and it was somebody else's fault, or maybe somebody did something to you that wasn't favorable, right? Or just an experience took place that wasn't the best, right? And the question is, well, how did you respond in that moment? Right? Because people can have a very similar experience and they can react very differently. Would you agree with that? An example, so I luckily had both my wife call and say flat tire, and my tenant for one of my rental properties call and say furnace went out, same day. Okay. Now, 10 years ago, I'd been like, this sucks. Like, I've got a lot to do on a Monday, right? But instead, perspective for me is, man, I'm so grateful that I have the means to be able to take care of these things without having to really worry about them, right? So you can say, well, this sucks. Why is this happening to me? Or I'm grateful that I can deal with this, I'm grateful that I have a rental property. I'm grateful that we both have our own vehicles. So just thinking about how you receive experiences, again, you got to look at, well, what is your daily routine or your weekly routine or your monthly routine that allows you to have a different perspective in those moments, right? For example, meditation could be one of those things where just having an inner alignment or peace can help you interact with different circumstances in a different way, right? So where are you standing is a great question to ask emotionally, okay? How are you receiving experiences? And so your perspective and the meaning that you tie to experiences matter. So it's not actually the experience or the challenge that comes into life that is important. It's what meaning do you subscribe or prescribe to that experience? Does that make sense? What was that? Yeah, yes, ascribe. Thank you. And so just always be mindful of like, what is your perspective on this particular outcome? Here's for both key components on mental and emotional health. So cognitive functioning includes processing like thinking, reasoning, and memory. So these things are, you can actually do certain exercises to improve memory, to improve all these different pieces of how quickly you're able to think about different situations. And so are you doing some mental exercises to help with that, especially as we age, right? Those things even become more important. Psychological resilience, so your capacity to recover from difficulties and adapt to challenges. Your self-esteem, a positive sense of self-worth and confidence highly is impacted by things like positive affirmations and what you're telling yourself. Growth mindset, so the saying that iron rusts from disuse, stagnant water loses its purity, and in cold weather becomes frozen. Even so does inaction sap the vigor of the mind. And then you've got your emotional key components. For speed, I'm going to go ahead and jump through these, but you'll get all these slides. So here's some daily rituals for mental and emotional mastery. Your growth mindset, feed your mind in the right stuff. So again, as Jim Rohn talked about, stand guard at the door of your mind. Make sure that you're intentionally subscribing to the right YouTube channels, the right podcasts, the right news outlets, right? So that you're not being influenced by things that are trying to persuade you in a certain way, to persuade you to think about things that are not actually always reality, right? Positive affirmations, organize your space. I promise that's a big one. I have just a consistent routine, just 30 minutes on the weekend. Let me organize something, right? Whether it be my closet, whether it be my office at home, something where I can just go ahead and make sure I kind of clean up the clutter. And that helps me to operate with more clarity of mind. Planning actually reduces your stress. So planning out your week or your next day can also impact your mental state. Practice mindfulness, productivity pause. It's an interesting one. So that one's saying, hey, I'm not going to just be go, go, go. I'm going to be intentional about my play time, about my recharge time in life as well. And so I know that we can be consistently chasing goals, and sometimes you actually need to pause that and focus on the mental and emotional health. Okay. And the last one is your social relationships health. So this study examined data from 309,000 people. It's the Harvard study. And it talked about how one of the greatest determining factors of health in late stages of life was actually dependent on the quality of relationships that we had. So it'd be a really interesting study for you to go and look at. But this 2 quotes, people will always forget, or people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this other one by Martin Luther King said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So oftentimes our emotional health, our mental health, when we actually are coming from a state of contribution of how can I serve and help others, we tend to forget about our own problems, right? And so I think that's why that thought process is so important, is when you start thinking about other people, your overall health improves. So social relationship well-being, here's some key components. Your deposits that you're making into other people, how are you investing into your relationships? Laugh often, right? So start staging experiences where you get to laugh with other people. Interpersonal skills, social support, conflict resolution, shared values and goals. again, because of timing, I'm just kind of cruising through these, but these are all good to come back and reflect on and kind of assess in your own life. Okay, last piece. So track your life happiness index. What gets measured gets improved. Everybody raise your hand really quick and follow me. I will complete this assessment by tonight. Okay, we're not going to do it together. We were, but for time's sake, we're going to go ahead and just have you do this later. So I'm going to explain it really quick. This is what it looks like. So you've got these life quality factors. Now, in the future, if you wanted to, you can come and craft your own factors that are important to you. I went ahead and just put the ones that I personally like to measure, but you can adjust these as you would like. And does anybody not have a sheet? Okay. So the only one that I'll explain is the DPA stands for dollar producing activities. DPA is dollar producing activities or income producing activities. Okay.
What's horizontal then?
So your horizontal income is going to be your net worth. Horizontal income is going to be your net worth. Okay. So DPA is more of your active income. Horizontal is more of your long-term net worth, wealth building. So these life factors, what you want to do is rank yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. Okay. In the column where it says December 2023, that's where I'd put those numbers. Where do you stand currently? And then what you're going to do is at the end of every quarter, do a reassessment. And it's going to show if you're improving, staying flat, or declining in specific areas. When you add all these numbers up, okay, in column December 2023, you add all these numbers and you'll divide it by 18 because there's 18 different categories there. Okay. And what it will do is give you a life happiness index average score. Okay. So it might be a 5.7 or a 5.9. Your goal is just to make small incremental improvements on that average, right? So going from a 5.7 to a 5.9 or 5.9 to 6.3, right? And so, and be intentional every quarter of, well, which ones do I want to focus on? Which ones are most important to me this quarter? And then lastly, just tracking some current health indicators, things like your weight, your body fat, your blood pressure. You can add to that as well or adjust those as far as the things that are important for you to track. And overall, this just gives you a very easy scorecard where it's one sheet of paper that can kind of track all the areas of health and help you just see progress in those different areas. Cool. Awesome. Any last minute thoughts or ahas before we wrap up today? Kemen.
Gratitude. I can't believe how many nuggets were in this. I have a whole bunch to walk through it, sure, but I wrote down as much as I ever had.
Presumes.
Oh, no, I just was sharing gratitude. I appreciate all the time and effort. You can tell you spent hours on this, and there were just a ton of good nuggets that I wrote down. So I do want to get the slides. It'd be good to go back and review all this. I hate we had to speed through in the end because it was fantastic. So thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments? Okay, you made a commitment, so fill this out today, all right? And then put it somewhere where you'll remember it and reflect on it moving forward. And have the best year health-wise yet, okay? All right, thank you all.